All right, I'll share my screen with you. Okay. All right, can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that why is this not, oh man, no. See, he messed things up. Now I can't like display it on here. Okay, wait, let me try a different way. Yeah, it's displaying on my other computer now. Okay, oh well. He messed up more things than he fixed. Now when I hit present, it goes over to my other computer. Okay, so what I was gonna say is it seems like the questions about ourselves and who we are sometimes the most difficult ones to answer, right? And so this book addresses like what is the self, you know, and talks about how those that raise us, that we're exposed to in our most earliest years of life are the ones that have the biggest impact on us and who we are today. And most oftentimes kind of hardwire us for who we are and who we're going to be. And that wiring can be changed, but it's hard, right? It's a difficult thing to do to, you know, undo the damage or undo the perception that we've kind of learned from somebody else and kind of taken that as us or who we are. And so the chapter 3 is going to talk about personal identity and the self. So how many of you guys say that you know yourself? Do you think you know yourself like really well? Or do you just know what others say you are or who others say you are? What do you guys think?
I feel like for the most part, I know myself, but I don't like to say fully because I feel like every day I hear something different from my friends or my boyfriend or my grandma that I didn't even realize that I didn't know about myself.
Yes, or have you ever had one of those situations where like somebody reacts to you in a certain way or tells you something about you and you're like, what? Like,
Yeah, definitely, many times.
yeah, you're like, I had no idea. Like, is that really me? Or somebody perceives you in a certain way and you're like, no, that can't be me. Like, that's
Yeah,
not
and
me.
then when they say it, you notice it more and more after that, like, oh wow, they're actually right. Hold up.
That's pretty crazy. Yes, thank you for sharing, Desiree. I agree with you. So how about we take just a couple minutes and write down 3 to 5 words that you would use to describe who you are. Did you guys get a few things down? Anybody want to share or maybe type into the chat some words that they used? Ambitious, yes, good. Empathetic, outgoing, respectful, very good. Madeline and Shelby are both outgoing.
I'll say something.
Yes.
I'm a little shy at first, but then once you get to know me, I'm loud and crazy, and you'll tell me to shut up. That's me.
I love that. That's awesome. Um, yeah, isn't that interesting how in the beginning when we meet people, like our full personality sometimes is not like in full bloom, right? It takes a little bit once we get to know them, and then we kind of can come out of our shells a little bit. Oh, Christy says she's an overthinker. I do that sometimes too, for
I think
sure.
about like everything and like worry about it, like even when it doesn't even like apply to me.
Yeah, I have a tendency to do that too. I've kind of learned some practices where I can let some of that stuff go, but yeah. Um, so would you guys say that when you're thinking about those that raised you, parents, grandparents, whoever that might be, that they would use the same words to describe you, or do you think they would use different ones?
I think they would use the same and maybe add a few more, like odd,
Okay.
well,
Are most of you like Juan, that they'd probably use the same words to describe you? The same ones, yeah. James.
Yeah. I believe they'd use the same words plus more because obviously they perceive you differently and know more about you.
Right. And if somebody's gonna brag, and I don't know, it's hard for me to like brag on myself, you know? Um, and then I get embarrassed. Like sometimes I'll be like with my mom or something, and my mom will start like bragging on me, and I feel embarrassed. I'm like, Mom, stop! Like, don't say that stuff. I feel weird. Um, yeah, so definitely, I agree. My my parents would probably use the same words, but more of them in addition to the ones that I would use. And that's, the book talks about direct definition, and we develop those direct definitions of those who are raising us, like that their definition becomes our definition, right? And it kind of starts to shape who we are as people, right? And then, society plays a role in that too, which is something else we'll talk about in a little bit. So the book doesn't talk about the Kubler-Ross model, but I always kind of think of one of the things that she said was that we're kind of a compilation of our physical self, our social self, and our psychological self. And so these three components, she said, made up a person, or the biopsychosocial self. So if we look at the biological part, that's physically, if we're talking about communication, or because that's the topic of our class, right? Like physically, can we hear? Or psychologically, are there things that are impeding our abilities to listen or to communicate? And then socially as well, how we were raised, our outside influences, our environment, all of that stuff kind of comes into play. And so the book goes into these three what it calls attachment styles, or styles of attachment. And if you think back and reflect on how our first caregivers treated us, that kind of leads to, as a segue into how we view ourselves. And there's these different styles of attachment. If we had a caregiver that was very loving and attentive, then we would tend to have a more secure attachment style. But if we have had caregivers that were dismissive and negative, we might have a more negative view of ourselves, and then we kind of have this kind of an interconnection of the two, which I thought was really interesting. This anxious slash ambivalent, which is goes along with something I read once that said consistency is best when, you know, you're raising a child, whether you're consistently good or consistently bad. That's better than being inconsistent. And that's where we get this anxious, ambivalent attachment style, where if we had a caregiver that was, you know, praising us for something one day and then you know, correcting us or criticizing us for the same thing the next day, then that's going to develop this kind of strange attachment style where, you know, you think that people are capable of love and you start to get close to them and then you pull away, right? And so, you know, those most basic interactions at the very beginning of our lives really play into who we become later on in life. What are your guys' thoughts when you're reflecting on your, you know, those caregivers that raised you and styles of attachment? Anybody have any thoughts?
I feel like that's super true because just to give a small example, my grandpa, well, both my grandparents, they weren't really like huggers. And my boyfriend's family, they hug all the time. All he ever wants to do when he sees me is hug. And I'm like, why are you hugging me? And he's like, why don't you like to hug? That's so weird. I'm like, well, my grandparents just never were like super huggy, and affectionate like that. So it's just so natural for me to just be like, hey, what's up? Instead of like do the whole, hey, hug, handshake, or whatever type thing.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, my growing up, like my parents are super affectionate. And so I'm just like naturally that way. And I always tell, like, even with you guys, you know, when we're working in the lab, like I don't have any problem. Like I don't have a bubble, you know, like I don't have a problem taking someone's hand and like showing them how to do something, or, you know, kind of somebody coming into my space. I don't have a problem with that. And so I always just kind of throw it out there like, look, I'm a hands-on kind of person. If I see you struggling, I'm gonna, you know, help correct you or whatever. And, you know, if you don't feel comfortable with that. So, and I have a good friend.
That would be cool. That would be fine.
It's not like an affectionate thing, but, you know, still some people have, like, they want their space.
Yeah, it definitely. Right? I get it.
And that's hard. In surgery, if you need your space, like you're going to have to get over needing your space, because we are shoulder to shoulder, you know, nose to nose with whoever we're working with. And, you know, because of that, we have to be able to be okay with working in close proximity with other people that we don't even know sometimes. So, yeah. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Thank you, Desiree. Anybody else have, like, my caregivers raised me this way and I had this style of attachment, but I've worked to change or alter that style? Anybody in that?
I would say I'm like that, actually. My parents raised me kind of like Desiree's grandparents. I wasn't raised with affection at all. We never been to like, I love you, like growing up. It just weird, I know, but it was normal for me. But with now that I have 2 children, I am like constantly showing them affection because I don't want that for them, kind of thing. Nothing against my parents, I love them,
Sure.
But I just don't know if I agree with the way they raised us affectionately wise. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how
absolutely.
I feel as well, because my family wasn't like that, but my kid's dad's family was, and I met him when I was 16. So on that side, it was really hard for me with the whole hug and kiss the cheek thing all the time. So with my own kids, I wanted them to feel that. And so I changed because I feel like, I don't know, I'm not a very affectionate person, you know, and with my kids, I always wanted them to know that I was there and that I loved them. Because my dad was a workaholic, so I barely saw my dad. My mom was in her own little world, even though she was an at-home mom, she was still in her own little world. So it was just like, whatever.
Yeah, very interesting. I've noticed my dad has changed over the years. Like I mean, he's always been like both of my parents are very caring, but my dad's always been more like, I don't know, stoic, you know, he doesn't show a ton of affection. But I've noticed like over the years where every single time we talk, you know, he says you know, I love you and those kinds of things. And I just don't remember that as much as a kid, but I remember, you know, like he does it all the time now. So I don't know what caused that change, but he's like a softer side of Sears now, I guess, if you want to say that. And I don't know.
My dad's the same way now. I think it comes with like older age, with them realizing that they're getting older. Because now every time me and my dad talk, he always goes, "Okay, love you, sweetie." Or now we're always hugging when we see each other. So I think it comes with old age.
I find it funny too because like growing up, my parents weren't affectionate, but now that they have grandkids, they're all like lovey-dovey, I love you, you know, pinching the cheeks, calling them like little pet names. And I'm just like, who are you people? Like that wasn't who you were like when I was little.
Uh, yeah, that's interesting how that changes for sure.
For
So,
me, it's kind of like a weird mix of like both because growing up, my mom's side of the family was very like they're very compassionate. Like they are like the type to hug you and kiss you on the cheek and hi, how are you? And call you 17 times throughout the day. And then my biological dad's side of the family was very like, hi, hey, what's up? And then when my stepdad came into my life, he was very like his whole family is very hugs and all this. So I've kind of gotten like a mix of both. And then when it comes to like relationships, I feel like I'm different. Like when it's a personal relationship, I'm very much so like, hey, I'm not that like clingy type of a person. And I think, I don't know if that's because like that's just how I was, you know, I was in a relationship for 5 years that was like that. And so I think that that kind of like swayed me to be more like cold shouldered to the whole affectionate thing. But then when I'm around my family now, we're like all very like huggy and hi and how are you and all that. So I have like a mix of both. I don't know what the heck's going on.
it's like a hodgepodge. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share? I like it when you guys talk more than me.
I feel like if we're talking about communication or like speaking about ourselves, I remember growing up, my grandpa always used to like when he did something wrong, he would like call himself dumb or like say negative things about himself. And it was weird because growing up in the beginning, I kind of got the habit of it. And then I realized that it just kind of makes life a little bit harder if you're doing that to yourself. So I tried to like not do that. And that's kind of like an opposite that I try to change. The stuff that he did around me, I try to be like, no, I'm smart. I got this. I tell myself that like 5 times a day.
That's good. You know, self-talk is a big thing. You know, what we say to ourselves, what we say about our own selves, like our brain will believe. And if we're, you know, saying negative things, then, you know, it's kind of like that the book talks about the self-fulfilling prophecy of, you know, what you think is what you attract. You know, it's that secret, if you guys ever read the book or watched the movie, but it's like that whatever you put out into the universe kind of comes back to you, sort of thing. And it's interesting that you say that because I worked with this surgeon who was crazy. a urologist, and he would do the same thing. But he would swear at himself, and he would say like, you idiot, you know, he would use his first name, but he would like be like, you idiot, Paul, you're so stupid, Paul, like, what are you doing, you know, just like in the middle of surgery, like, and I can't even figure out what's going wrong, and here he is like cussing at himself and saying these bad things about himself, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do, I'll just stand here.
Yeah, super awkward. And see that in that moment, I would want to tell him like, no, don't say that. Like, say you're cool, say you're good, say you're smart. But I mean, as we're on the side, we're not supposed to, right? Like a little bit low key, but not really, because he's our boss. So, and we don't want to piss him
Yeah,
off more.
especially if you don't know them well. I would say if you know, like the more you know them, you know what kind of relationship you have. Some you just develop a really strong rapport with, and others you just still feel like it's very, I don't know, stiff. I don't know, just like, you know, like you can't relax at all. It's just like, let your hair down. But and with him, he was kind of like that. He was just this really strange character. And you know, yeah, I remember actually my preceptor worked with him a lot. And so I was like hitched to her wagon, right? So I worked with him a lot. And then eventually I started working by myself. I was hired there. And, you know, for a while she still precepted me, but then I was in his room by myself. And I'd been in there tons of times, but with her. And so I was at the back table and I was setting up the stuff, and he walks in. And so I heard the door. So I just looked to see like who it was. And I saw him walk in, and he looks at me and he goes over to the anesthesia care provider. And he like whispers something to him, and they walk out. And then anesthesia walks back in, but the doctor didn't. So he was scrubbing his paws or something. And anesthesia says, he said he doesn't feel comfortable having you in here because he doesn't know you and he's never seen you before. And I'm like, I'm in here all the time with Marilyn. And he's like, I know, I told him that. I said, don't worry, she's good. Just leave her alone. And so anyways, I scrubbed his case, but it took a long time for me to like develop a rapport with him and just gain his trust. Like he wouldn't let me put anything together. He would like, he did everything himself. Even if I put stuff together, I swear he would take everything apart and put it back together himself for probably like the first 2 years I worked with them. And then I don't know, something happened. Maybe he figured I was going to stay or something. And then it was like almost a complete switch. Like he wouldn't do anything. He made me do everything. I assembled everything. I passed everything. I loaded everything. So it is, you know.
How crazy. That is
I know.
Do you think some of these surgeons might be on like the spectrum a little bit, like Asperger's?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he would definitely be one. There was a plastic surgeon I work with that I swear I would say he has Asperger's because he just he had no social skills whatsoever. And the few times I did have conversations with him, he just made me feel so stupid that I just told myself, you know what? It's just going to be business. Otherwise, I am not small talking with him because he would find a way to make me feel dumb. And I was like, I'm not going to let him do that to me anymore. You know, so yeah, definitely. I think you have to be a little bit crazy to be a surgeon anyways, but that's just my opinion. I mean, there's plenty of nice ones out there, but they're just all a little bit off.
Yeah, I remember in our interview, you said something like something goes wrong partway through medical school or something weird happens that makes them.
Yeah. It must be medical school that does something to them. It makes them a little titch crazy, I think. For sure. Well, that's my stories.
How many surgeons have you worked for?
Oh gosh. I haven't worked for any, but I've worked with.
Worked with.
Yeah. I don't even know. I haven't worked at that many places though. I spent the first 10 years of my career at the it wasn't Banner at the time, but the Banner Casa Grande Hospital, because I lived in Casa Grande, went to high school there and then junior college. And then when I went to tech school, was still living in Casa Grande. I was driving back and forth up here for school, and then did my externship there, got hired there, and then worked there for quite a few years with, I don't know, if there was like 20 or 30 surgeons on staff. And then I went to Tucson and worked at a surgery center there for 4 years. And I spent a year in Colorado moonlighting. But for the most part, like, you know, those are my two main places that I worked. But at the surgery center in Tucson, there are a lot of surgeons that, you know, because the main hospital was in the same parking lot. So we had most of the surgeons from the main would come over to the surgery center to do their outpatient stuff.
What surgery center did you work at in Tucson?
Northwest Tucson Surgery Center. They're right by Northwest Hospital on La Cholla on the north side.
Did you ever work with a Dr. Taki? He's plastics.
No, but I know of him. I didn't work with him, but I met him.
Dads. It's like one of my good friend's dads. Yeah. And he's a plastic surgeon. So I've gotten to talk to him about like surgery tech and whatnot.
That's awesome.
I was like, what do you want in a surg tech? I'm like, when you go into a surgery, what do you expect? You know, like, give me who I need to be.
What did he say?
He's just like, I mean, I want someone who's prepared and somebody who, you know, knows the procedure that we're doing and knows the case and isn't going in there clueless. And he's like, I want to be able to feel like, I want you to feel like you're comfortable and not intimidated by anything going on. He's like, I want someone who's confident in their work. And he's like, and somebody who will stand their ground and not just turn into a sad little puppy dog if I tell them something they did wrong. And he's like, I need you to, you know, like, he told me a story about he had a surg tech one time. I think he had the wrong instrument or had just done something or messed up a count, and he had just kind of corrected them on it and kind of made a little comment about like, you know, doing that. And he said that the surg tech just kind of like shut down, and for the rest of the case didn't really say much, didn't really have that like spark in them anymore, kind of just seemed like they were so upset over his one comment. And he's like, I don't do it to upset people. I just am trying to help. I'm trying to make it easier on you, coming from a surgeon who's not going to be a total a-hole about it, someone who's going to talk to you like a human. And he's like, so, you know, be able to stand your ground. He's like, don't, you know, if I say something or if another surgeon says something you don't like, or they suggest you do something another way, you tell them, you know, this is how I do this. And guess what? They don't have your job, so that's that. But he's really cool, and it's cool, you know, we got to talk a lot about plastics because that's just so so interesting. So it's fun. But I just was curious if you knew him.
Yeah, no, I never got to work with him, but it's really nice when you can have a surgeon that they'll share that stuff with you. You know, there's another plastic surgeon in Tucson who's my favorite surgeon in the whole world. His name is Dr. Hess. And, you know, he said a lot of the same things. When I was in Tucson teaching, he came to talk to a couple of my groups of students. And one thing he said that really stood out was the surg tech can make the best case, the easiest case the hardest, and the hardest case the easiest. Depending on what their level of competency is. And, you know, that kind of stuck with me. And then there's an ophthalmologist, he's a pediatric ophthalmologist, and he came to one of our meetings, and he said, the worst feeling ever is having a new tech in your room that you don't know, and you walk in and you introduce yourself and they introduce their self, and they either say, I've never done eyes before, or I don't like doing eyes. He's like, your surgeon never wants to hear those two things. ever. They don't want to hear that you don't like their specialty, and they don't want to know that you don't, know anything about it. He's like, lie to me, like do whatever you got to do, but just don't tell me those things, because that just starts the day, bad right off the bat. So
yeah, I've also gotten, my sister's husband he's a device rep for some company down in Tucson. And so, he's in surgery every day and making sure that these devices are put in properly and whatnot. And he tells me, because then I asked from his perspective, like, well, what do you expect as a surge tech? Because he works with surge techs every day. I mean, he brings them the device. He takes everything from sterile processing and gets it to them and, explains kind of, this is how it's going to work. This is what you need to do. And he says, I don't walk into an OR expecting this surge tech to know exactly what device we're using and how it's going to be done, because that would just be rude to be like, okay, you need to know every device we're going to use. And he's like, so I kind of take everything with a grain of salt and I like to explain. And he's like, but someone who's just open-minded to new ideas and willing to be like a fast learner and listen to what I have to say without having that kind of attitude of like, I know what I'm doing. And he's like, because I give advice and I tell them this is the way the device is going to go. These are the things you're going to need to implant the device or whatever it might be. They do a lot of like spinal devices and screws and things like that. And so he just told me from his perspective as like just even a device, like, rep. And that's just somebody so small, but it's someone we're going to come across often enough to where their perspective on us is important. I feel like it's good to know what they expect out of us too.
For sure. A lot of times they're the ones that are leading us through the steps of some, wingdings, some parts and pieces, some sort of system that we've never seen before. It could be total joint, it could be a spine something, it could be some sort of pain device that we're putting in the patient, whatever the case may be. They're like they're the ones that's going to tell us what to do next, when we don't know, and they're not supposed to, but they're also going to help the surgeon with their technique, say, okay, this is, how this should typically go or whatever the case may be. And, be kind to your reps. I'm telling you, because they can make you or break you. They can make you look really awesome, or they can make you look like you really suck, like just put pretty bluntly. But yeah, working with the reps is fun for sure. Good conversation. Thank you. Anything else? Any other thoughts or about how any of this relates back to us? Just kind of moving on through the book here, something else that it mentions, and I think we might have talked about this briefly before, is just scripts, right? How there's different scripts that we have that we use in different situations, right? But those scripts, a lot of times we learn when we're growing up, right? And so whether it's what family has told us, or peers, or people at work, whatever the case may be, shapes us, impacts us, affects our perceptions of ourselves and of the world, and how we relate to others. And then this is just that self-fulfilling prophecy I was talking about. We act in ways that bring about expectations or judgments of ourselves. So our self-talk, right? If we say positive things are going to happen to us, then more than likely positive things will. If we say negative things about ourselves, then that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we say, okay, we're going to fail, we're not going to make it, and we keep telling ourselves that, there's a high probability that we will. The power of the mind is a crazy thing. Was actually working at the hospital in Casa Grande, and they had started a Saturday shift. where surgeons could schedule elective cases. And so I was working 3/12s, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It was a Saturday, and we had a patient scheduled for a tubal ligation. So she's getting her tubes tied. And I was in the room, I was setting up for the case, and the nurse comes in and she's like, we might not be doing this case. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And she says, well, I went to talk to the patient, and the patient's, I asked her if she had any concerns, questions, whatever. And she said, I don't think I'm going to wake up from this surgery. She said, so I told anesthesia, and, you know, they're kind of talking over. Well, they ended up canceling her case and not doing it because she felt that she was going to die. That was the thought that was in her mind, that she wasn't going to wake up from surgery. So since it was an elective surgery, we canceled it. If it would have been an emergency, that would have been a different outcome. But the power of the mind, and it's a thing, right? It can be changed, but it's hard, right? It's hard for us to change, you know, a repetitive way of thinking. Another concept that the book talks about is reflected appraisal. And that's how others see us, right? Or we see ourselves in terms of how others see us, called the looking glass self. It could be a good thing if others perceive us as amazing, but if they don't, it could be a different story. And then social perspectives, right? So there's a whole bunch of forces in our environment that kind of act on us that make us who we are. So think about 100 years ago, what the social norm was compared to what the social norm is now. Like nothing's changed, right? Wrong. So much has changed, right? As far as what society says is okay at large, right? And then different cultures have different social perspectives. Like think about Europe, like people run around naked in Europe, right? It's totally fine. But here, you know, it's not common, right, to see that. So depending on where you are, there may be different social perspectives according to culture. And then of course there's digital media. What do you guys think? Is social media shaping your personal identity? You guys are like the you know, the digital age, the digital generation.
I actually have a good example of this. The other day, my daughter was pretending, like playing pretend house, and she was going like this up to her ear to talk on the phone. And my mom was like, why aren't you doing this? She's like, because this is a phone. Like, they don't know what this means. So I just thought that was like over the generations, like how everything has changed with technology and stuff like that. Or my husband has one of those old Game Boys, like the Game Boy Colors. And my son was trying to like poke at the screen to move the pictures. So I just thought that was like an example.
For sure. You know, oh my gosh. I just think about if my grandma was still alive, you know, she was like born in the early 20s, or just in her life, like almost 90 years of her life, like how much change she saw. And I remember her saying one time something like, I've bought the same music 4 times or 5 times. She's like, there was 8-track, there was 4-track, there was record, there was cassette, now there's DVD, or CD, DVD too, but you know, she's like, all of these different types of media as they come along, you know, she had repurchased her music. So, you know, technology is definitely impacting us in the way that we communicate. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to be doing this right now that we're doing and still having class in this crazy time. What about oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think it also kind of affects what people believe too, because my sister's 13. So anything that she sees on what's it called, TikTok, she It's true. Like she'll see a video of a like a Photoshop cloud that looks exactly like a lion, and my mom will be like, that's not real. That's all edited. And she's like, but I saw it. It's a video. It's true. It happened.
Mm.
So I
Yep.
think social media can definitely shape what people are going to believe, and then
Our reality, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So does this like impact us in the operating room at all, this stuff that we're talking about?
I think it depends on what you. I follow a couple surgeons on Instagram. I just watched a facelift that happened on someone while they were awake, which
Wow.
I didn't know that that was possible, but that was pretty crazy to see. So I think if you put the right way, you can learn a lot. It just depends on what you're looking at.
True story. I agree with you. I think one thing that I think about, like I'm not a huge social media fan, like LinkedIn is my social media if I have time to look at any type of social media. And I got rid of my Facebook a long time ago, but one thing that I think is always crazy is, like it seems like a majority of the time when patients like come into the office, like to see the doctor, they already know what they have, right? They've self-diagnosed themselves. They're already going to ask for whatever prescription that they've researched that the internet says that they need on WebMD. So there is so much information out there that can doctors really treat patients authentically? I think that's a thing.
I actually agree with that because the hand doctor I used to work for, we would have patients come in saying, oh no, I know I have carpal tunnel, like this is it. And he'd be like, no, you have like trigger thumb or something. And they would like sit there and fight him on it. And he was like, I just did all the tests. Like I'm showing you.
Yes. And you hear like surgeons will talk about those things too, whether you're in the lounge and they're grabbing a snack or some coffee, or you're in the operating room working or whatever, that they have these patients that pretty much come in and do that same exact thing, say this is what I have, this is what's going on, and the doctor's like, no, that's not what you have, this is what you have. And so yeah, I think information has definitely caused that. It's very interesting. What about your self-image? Do you guys think that social media has impacted your own personal self-images?
I mean, it definitely hasn't really affected mine, but I see how it affects a lot of people. I mean, because, you see these photoshopped pictures of, people taking pictures from the perfect angle and all this stuff and all these happy photos with all their cool friends and all this stuff. And people think, wow, they must be happy and perfect all the time. So what's wrong with me? But really, everybody's got screwed up lives when it comes down to it. But it's just what you show to
Exactly.
people.
I agree with you 100%. Hi, Kat.
When you're done with your Zoom, can I talk with you?
Yeah, I won't be done till 5, but I will give them a break here in a few minutes. I could come see you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'll be in my office.
Okay, thank you.
That's where they keep me.
Sorry, guys. This is the thing about being in my office. People know I'm here now. Like for a while, they didn't come here because for 6 months I wasn't here. But now they are coming here. Yeah, I think about like bullying and stuff too that goes on. Like I haven't ever been a part of any of that, but how easy it is for, especially for more famous people, right, or more popular people, one comment that's made can kind of spread like wildfire just because of how technology is today, and can, cause a bunch of trouble. It's crazy. That's why I like to keep a low profile.
I saw, I think it was a comment. I'm not sure if this woman was a politician or not, but I guess she was really wealthy, and she commented on Kylie Jenner's post of posting her daughter Stormy with like a $12,000 backpack on her first day of school, and the politician lady was like, "How could you be posting like a $12,000 backpack when people are like in a pandemic and people are out of jobs right now? Like, what are you thinking?" Basically, like judging her for posting a picture of her daughter, but with a wealthy backpack, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah. And then so somebody's judging that, right? Like she's judging, and then other people are judging her judging. It's like everybody's lives kind of get like displayed for everybody to see, which I don't like. I don't like that.
There's also like safety on the internet where you can say anything without any repercussions, really, if you're just an average person. So you don't have to worry about a physical altercation, like anything like that. You can just fly off at the mouth, and then you get that group think thing going. People see you doing that, it makes them feel stronger, so they jump in, and then it just, yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy. You're absolutely right. And then I think that kind of goes back to that 70 to 80% of communication being like physically in a space with someone, seeing their body language, eye contact, face to face, that when there is no face, there's no body, it's just a screen. Like it's super easy to say whatever you got to say, let's break up, it's over, it's done. That's super simple to send on a text message, right? But to tell somebody to their face is a different story. So yeah.
I feel like also like one of the biggest things with social media is that it creates like, before social media was huge, girls would see people in magazines and be like, that's what I want to look like, you know what I mean? But now we've come up with such like social standards for how everybody should look and feel and act in a certain way, to where a 13-year-old girl might go on social media and see some girl with some big fake boobs and a big fake butt and some tiny little waist and be like, I need to look like that. Look at herself in the mirror and say, why don't I look like that? And it causes a lot of like self-image issues in young girls. And I feel like that is something that so many, I mean, not even just females, males too. I mean, you go on Instagram, there's these models with these like 8-packs and these big muscles, and you're like, oh yeah, like that's the social standard that we have now made for everybody to look like. But it's funny to me because this generation loves to like say that we accept everybody, we love everybody, but then it's like, then why do we try to fit people into these little categories of, you need to look this way, and if you don't, then you can't sit with us, pretty much. So I feel like social media affects everybody, because even if you go on and you see, even as a 30-year-old mom, you could go on and see another 30-year-old mom doing things completely differently, and then you question your way of doing things, all because of what you saw on social media. And it's like, that social media shouldn't define how anyone should live their lives, but yet it plays such a big role in people's lives these days.
Definitely. You're absolutely
That's actually
right.
what my persuasive speech was supposed to be about, how social media is actually changing people's brain chemistry and like their brain, like how we interpret things. Because I watched a documentary about it, and it was like really interesting to me.
I think it is changing our brains. I think it has changed our brains. Just the access that we have to other people, and whatever they want to put about their lives that's going on outside.
And tying back to the kind of unattainable standards on like Instagram and stuff, I think it's also like that kind of thing has helped me feel better about myself in a weird way, because since it's become more widespread, more people are calling it out and being like, hey, this isn't normal. Like, this is a toxic thing that people are doing. So then I see the people that are calling it out and saying this is a normal body. They're editing themselves. Like, this is what they would look like normally. So then it's making me realize, like, okay, this isn't an attainable thing that I need to worry about. So I should be comfortable with how I am because people are changing themselves to look how they think they should, basically.
Sure. And that goes back to what Cameron is saying is, you know, it's what we choose to look at, right? Like what we choose to read, what we choose to expose ourselves to. Like I hardly watch the news. I just choose not to expose myself to most of that. Like, you know, I might read a couple of headlines, but my mom is one of those people that constantly has the news on. And then that's all she talks about, all the bad stuff that's going on. And after a while, I just, I don't know. I just don't want to expose myself to so much of that stuff. I still want to know what's going on in the world, but to be inundated with it 24/7 is just not something that I want to fill my brain with.
Also with that, it's like people kind of what they choose to look at is also what they choose not to look at. Because I've known about a couple of influencers that have lost like $100,000 in sponsorships because someone else with a lot of fans made a bunch of claims, and they would call their job, get them fired, call whoever was sponsoring them, so they dropped the sponsorships, even though it wasn't true. They don't look into it. There's like, oh, there's 300,000 people that called and reported this person for this, so we're just going to drop their sponsorship, and they're losing money. And it's,
yeah,
that's why I kind of like what you were saying about staying low key. I haven't had a Facebook in years. You know, I have an Instagram, but I don't really post on that. Stay away from it all.
I have an Instagram too, but I only post my cheesecakes. So yeah, there's that. None of me, just my cheesecakes. So social media is bad. That's what you're saying. For the most part, bad. A little bit good.
It's gone so far beyond just keeping in touch with people, you know, it's like, that's not even what it's about anymore. You just, you get you can be a fly on the wall and, everybody's lives. And I don't know, we get off on that somehow. It's weird.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe more so even when there's like catastrophes in other people's lives, and you're like, oh, thank goodness somebody else has it worse than me. Like, I mean, maybe that lifts some of us up. I don't know. But so just know this, we're bringing that into our workspace, into our lives, into our workspace. Our surgeons are bringing that into their lives and workspace. And we have to be really careful. One situation that really sticks out in my mind was when I was at the surgery center in Tucson, one of the nurses that I worked with took a snapshot of a patient's gnarly foot. And we were going to be fixing the foot, but the toes looked really like crooked and twisted and bent and, so she took a picture of it. It didn't have any patient identifiers or anything, but she posted it on her Facebook. Like, look at this gnarly foot that we worked on today. I don't know what she said. Anyways, a friend of a friend saw the post and came in the next day and told the boss. And they fired her that day. They walked her to her locker, said, clean out your locker, you are done. And, it wasn't like it said, this is Jane Smith's foot or anything like that. So, it goes along with my whole spiel about, Google yourself because you can bet that your hiring manager is probably Googled you already. So just know what's out there about yourself for sure and be careful. And if you need to clean it up, right? Okay, that's my spiel. Let's see, we just have a couple slides left here. So we'll finish this up and then we'll take a break. So how do we make ourselves better? And I think it's important. One thing I always say is we should continue to hone our craft, whatever that is. If we're talking about communication, we should continue to hone our craft. If it's about being a surge tech, we should continue to hone our craft. And so the book gives some suggestions on how we can make ourselves better And the top thing I love, just commit to improving ourselves every day in some little way, every single day. And as surge techs, if we do this, then we're improving our patient care every single day. And then gain knowledge every day. Again, as surge techs, when you graduate from this program, like your learning has just started, right? So there's going to be learning every single day that you're on the job, which is something that I love about this job and has kind of kept me tethered to it all of these years. Is, you guys talked about lifelong learning in surge tech class yesterday. I mean, that is part of the fabric of what we do, and just being committed to that every day. And then I think on the heels of that, sharing what we know with others, right? Not holding that knowledge close to our chest, but being a resource for others so that they can give better patient care or continue to hone their craft, whatever the case may be. And then goal setting. You guys are doing that right now. You signed up for this program. So you have a goal to be a surge tech, and I'm going to help you get there. But it's kind of like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? You can't think about stuffing down the whole elephant all at once. And so we want to make sure that those goals are small and they're achievable, right? So you might look at becoming a surge tech as one class at a time, right? So, okay, right now we're doing communications and surge tech. And then after that, it's medical terminology. And after that, it's, anatomy and physiology, whatever the case may be. Just kind of, keep your head down and take one bite at a time. And then before you know it, you'll be there. Self-disclosure when appropriate. Right? When we make ourselves vulnerable to others and we talk to them about ourselves personally, then it helps them to open up to us too. That builds rapport. And sometimes it's more appropriate than others, right? But I remember a piece of advice I received a long time ago. This gal that was my friend and my mentor, she said, share your story. And when I finally got brave enough to share my story, I did discover that there are others like me, which, is helpful. And then accepting that you're a work in progress, that's all of us, right? And I just added in here, give yourself grace, right? Especially in this program. So cohort 4 is going through this right now because they're just really starting to get into like all of their skills. We're doing a breast biopsy. It's not a huge case, but it is a lot of new skills for them to, master. And they're not there yet. But I always tell them, tell all of you guys, give yourself grace. They're like, we don't want to mess up. Well, you're going to mess up. End of story. We're going to mess up. Everybody messes up. Mess up here at school instead of messing up out there. But as we kind of get more into this program and we're in lab and we're practicing our skills, give yourself grace. Don't expect that you're just going to pick these skills up, in the blink of an eye and it's all going to be good. The things that we do in the OR, they're weird things. They're not things that we typically do day in and day out, like if I wanted to be a bus driver, like I know how to drive a car. I mean, I already have some skills that I picked up, right? But, opening sterile packages and practicing sterile technique probably isn't something we do very much unless you like to eat string cheese. Okay. So give yourself grace. And then lastly, create a supportive context for change. And don't self-sabotage yourself, right? Surround yourself with those that are going to support you. Your dreams, your goals, let people know that you want to change or that you're in this program, you're striving to better yourself, and, ask them to help you along the way. That's what I do. Questions, comments about enhancing ourselves? Anything else you guys would add? that I left out or the book left out?
Kind of sort of on the topic, but you mentioned mistakes. Like what would you say is like the worst mistake you've seen or heard of a surgical tech making that really caused an issue?
So a couple come to mind, and they're both about my dear friend, Catherine. But I've made some mistakes too, and I can definitely share that. But one, so she's a surge tech, and while she was going to nursing school, and so this was quite a while ago, but she was scrubbing a craniotomy. And typically when you do a craniotomy, they like cut out a piece of skull, right? They call that the flap, a skull flap. And then they give you the skull flap. You put that on your back table, and then, you know, when it's time to stuff the brains back in the hole, you put the skull flap back on and put some screws on there and keep it in. So she had taken the skull flap and she had wrapped it in a lap sponge, which is kind of a big sponge with a blue tail that we use. And when it got time to count, she picked up the sponge and she threw it off the field into what we call the kick bucket, which is a non-sterile little bucket with wheels that we throw all of our dirty sponges into. So she threw the skull cap, let's just say, in the trash, basically. Yeah, that's one of the worst. Like,
So it was unusable at that point, right?
they still used it.
Did they? Oh, okay. That's crazy.
They did. She said they put some saline on her field. They put a bunch of antibiotics into it, and the nurse fished the skull cap out of the kick bucket, and they put it and soaked it in the antibiotic solution, and then put it back on the patient's brain.
Oh my
Did
God.
the patient get any infections?
I don't know that. I don't know that part of the story. And I don't know if she did either. She didn't say, but that's one horror story that, you know, I was just there when she was telling another group of students about it. But
it's a pretty generally small community too, right? So, I mean, that would get around, wouldn't it?
yeah, it's a small community. It really is. They say 6 degrees of separation, but I think surge techs are more like 3 degrees. Or healthcare in general, you know, it really does seem like that. Yeah, and then my other friend, she was training to do open hearts. And the first open heart case, she was scrubbing by herself. She went to pass the scalpel to the surgeon, and she thought the surgeon had the scalpel, but he didn't. And she let go, and the scalpel fell. And he was wearing Crocs, you know, those little shoes with the little holes all in them. And it stabbed right into his foot. It was just stuck there in his foot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what happened? And she said, he just turned to me and he said, you have to calm down. Like, you are so lucky. You are so lucky. Like, that could have been so much worse. So yeah, things happen. I think one of my biggest mistakes was, we're back at the surgery center. We had one surgeon that had some block time on Fridays, and nobody wanted to work with her because she would come in about 1 o'clock and she would schedule some cases, which should have taken like 2 hours to do them all, but she just took forever. She took forever. She was slow. She would go eat a salad in between cases, and then you're in there with the patient waiting. She's eating her salad and you're ready to do surgery. She just took forever. But she was like the nicest person. So I'm like, I'll work with her on Fridays. You know, nobody wants to work late on Fridays. But anyways, I was like, I don't mind working with her, you know. So one Friday, we had several cases in a row, and there are only so many trays. Like, she had her own special trays. And so I had to have one tray turned over, and we were going to have to put it into what's called the flash sterilizer, or the immediate use steam sterilizer, which, you know, it should go through processing, go through the whole thing, get wrapped, get packaged, get cooked, but that takes too long. So we were just going to put it in the flash sterilizer. And so that's what we did. And so I'm getting everything ready at my table. The patient is in, she's injecting some numbing medicine into their eyelids. And I'm getting my instruments out of the flash pack, setting up my field, and I'm done. Okay, I'm waiting. She's injecting the patient, I'm waiting, and I look over into the tray where I got my instruments from, and the little indicator that's supposed to turn black when you cook it is not black. It's white. AKA, it never got sterilized. So at least we didn't like cut, poke, or prod our patient with dirty instruments, but we definitely could have. I didn't check the indicator. I was in a hurry because she was ready, which never happens. And I was just, I was, you know, complacent, and just hurried and grabbed my instruments out of there and set up my field. And so when I saw it, I like whispered to my nurse, I'm like, come here. So I told her, and she's like, well, do you want me to tell her? And I'm like, no, I'll tell her. And so I told her, and she wasn't mad, but she had to wait while we processed the instruments, and I had to tear all my stuff down and throw it away and go get new stuff. And, you know, the patient's laying there with their eyeballs numb. And anyways, it was probably like a 20-minute delay. So yeah, I would say that's, you know, that's one thing about like working fast. Like, we want to be efficient at what we do, but we don't want to go so fast that we miss things, you know. And that could have been, I mean, we're working on somebody's eyeball. Like, what if they got an infection in their eyeball and they had to have their eye taken out? I mean, who knows? It could have been like really awful. So yeah, just, you know, as we go through this program, we'll talk about checks and balances and two sets of eyes seeing things. And, you know, and it's so important because a small little thing, we talked about this already, is how a small little thing can have like a huge impact, you know, down the line. So yeah.
When you told the surgeon about what happened, did you tell her like in a way that the patient didn't hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because her patients, and she was really persnickety about it too, like really saying a whole lot of stuff with the patient in the room because her patient stayed awake. Okay. You know, they would just have like anesthesia, would give like a little sleepy medicine. So they'd kind of like be napping. But yeah, I just, you know, she came to the side and I let her know what was going on without the patient knowing, because, you know, she had yelled at nurses in the room before, snapped at them because one of the nurses dropped something onto the floor, her pen, I think, and she said, oops. And the surgeon was like, you know, very matter of fact about, you don't say those things. My patient is awake. They might think that something's gone wrong with surgery. Like, you don't say those things. So, yeah.
Okay.
Good question. Other thoughts before we wrap this up? Take a break. See what our last slide is. Oh, I had this video, but it's not that my video would even play, but it's not available anymore. But it was just this fantastic video about, you know, what do you want your legacy to be, you know, and I think it's kind of a good place to kind of end and just reflect and pause for a minute about, you know, you guys are embarking on a new career, and what do you want that to be? What do you want that to look like? You know, maybe some of you, you know, this is just the first step in your education, or for others, this is the last step in your education. Whatever the case may be, it's you know, to be commended either way. You know, but just think about what you would want your legacy to be? I think that's important for us to think about. Do you guys have any thoughts about what you want your legacy to be? Like if you could finish the sentence, I want to be remembered for blank, what would you put in there? Or I want to be remembered as.
Reliable. Like
Definitely.
not just like my coworkers, but well, definitely them too, but like my family, friends, you know, anyone that's like in my life, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And your patients too, right? Like if you were standing behind the scenes and there was a group of people that, you know, you had touched their lives and they were talking about you, like what would you want to hear them say? And, you know, I think reliable is, you know, it says a lot about, you know, a variety of different like facets of life for sure.
For me, just if I say I'm going to do something, that I follow through and do it, you know, and I'm true to my word. So
My word's really important to me too. I can totally relate to that. Sometimes I feel like that's all I have, you know, like my integrity, like I think that's what I would want somebody, you know, to say too, like, you know, that they recognize my integrity, because that, like I said, sometimes it feels like that's all I have that I can control. Sadie, could you bring some of those for me to sample, please? Yes, being a good person. I agree, Christy. I one of the surgeons that I worked with that was a general surgeon, she was the chief of surgery for many years while I worked at the Casa Grande Hospital, and she actually passed away. But she had posted a comment on my LinkedIn, and she said something about when you're in surgery, like Rhiannon is the one you want standing beside you or something like that. And like, I'll never forget that. Like, I didn't ask her to do it. I didn't prompt her to do it. And sometimes I see it, and, you know, now that she's not here anymore, that's a big deal, you know? It's a big deal. I like being able to change lives and help you guys achieve your goals too. Oh, yes, being yourself, the authentic self. Sometimes that's hard. Those are all good ones. Being a leader, being ambitious, helping people. Yes, you will. You guys are going to help people. Awesome. That's a really good one too, Heather. When I think about strong and never giving up, it makes me think of grit. I don't know if you guys, there's a book by this gal, Angela Duckworth, and she writes about grit. And grit is like that thing that some people have that no matter how many times they get knocked down, right? They get back up, they dust themselves off, and they keep marching forward. You know, and I can promise as you know, the field that you're going into, there's going to be some days that you're going to feel like you get knocked down. Like There was one day that I literally sat down in the middle of the hall and started to cry. Um, it had been a very long day, and I was on call, and the evening person did not show up. So I had been there since 7 a.m. It was 11 p.m., and we had one more ankle fracture to go. And I was carrying the fracture tray back to my room so that I could put it in the sterilizer. And the C-arm was like this big x-ray device thing was like entering the room, trying to go in the door at the same time. And I tried to like hurry and get in front of him because he couldn't see me because he's got this big old machine he's trying to turn. And it hit me. Actually, it hit my tray. And it was just the right way that the whole thing like flipped upside down, and little bitty screws, hundreds of them, went everywhere. And I just literally sat down on the floor and started to cry. And then I pulled myself back together, but so there's going to be those days. That's nice, Juan. Yes. Giving back is important. Thank you guys for sharing. Oh, I didn't see Shelby's too. Loyal and strong. I love it. All right. Well, I think that concludes our discussion of chapter 3. Do you guys have any other like questions or comments about anything that we've talked about or anything that was in chapter 3 that we didn't discuss? Anything at all? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. Okay. So the book differentiates between hearing and listening by saying that hearing is a physiological process, right? It has to do with our anatomy and how our hearing system, our auditory system is built, right? That's the physical process of sound waves entering the ear and making the eardrum vibrate and yada, yada, and so on and so forth. But listening is different altogether. We don't really have to do anything to hear per se if our auditory system is functioning properly, but to listen, we kind of have to do some stuff, right? We have to put in a little bit more effort. So it's an active process. So it involves a variety of things that the book talks about, like being mindful, right? Just being clued in, focusing your attention on, you know, the person that is speaking, selecting and organizing information in a way that helps it to make sense to you. And sometimes there's a bit of memorization that might need to go into that. And the book talks about using mnemonics to try to help us to remember some of those bits and pieces. What are some things that you can do in the operating room that will make you a better listener?
Keep eye contact.
Good one. What if sometimes the surgeon's not going to want to look up though, right? Like they're going to be focused down, you know, in the belly, and they might be saying something or wanting something or needing something. So that might be the situation too. Definitely whenever possible, eye contact, but sometimes that might not be possible.
Just kind of be aware, like who's talking, and always be ready to listen. Because if you're not ready to listen, you won't take in what's being said.
Absolutely.
Maybe instead of trying to make eye contact, because like you said, watching what they're doing, so then you can anticipate what they're going to need next. So it's not really listening, but I guess more anticipation. I don't know.
No, it's like listening with your eyes. Yeah, that's what I call it. Yeah, for sure. Like you can't anticipate what is going on the field if you're not looking at what's going on the field. And early on, one of the surgeons I worked with gave me that little tidbit, you know. She was speaking about my preceptor, saying one of the reasons that she was so good at what she did was that she paid attention to the field, you know. And so absolutely, I think that is a huge part. Let me see what's going on in the chat here. Shelby says, being aware of your surroundings and what's going on, repeating what they say. Oh, that's a good one. Like paraphrasing or summarizing and speaking clearly. Yeah, that's hard too, right? When we're in the operating room and there's all these noises and we have masks. And I mean, we have more practice with masks now, but can definitely impede our listening. Any other thoughts?
Ask questions to make sure you understand what they're saying.
Use questions, get clarification. Yes, absolutely.
Respond to them so that they know you're listening.
Yes, that is a big one because surgeons, they don't like to wait for things. And so there may be situations where they're like, you know, can I have the thing? And you're like, I don't have the thing. And they're like, okay, well then give me thing number 2. And so you do, and they're using thing number 2, right? And then you get thing number 1, you want to tell them that you have it, right? I have thing number 1. Whenever you're ready or whenever you need it, it's here for you, because they'll be working away and pretty soon they're like, you know, did you ever get thing number 1? And you're like, yeah, it's been here. And they're like, well, I needed it. Why didn't you give it to me? Right? So even when they ask me something, you know, that's kind of a rhetorical question, I always make it a point to give a yes or a no or whatever the case may be, so that if they're not looking up at me, they know that I've heard and understood what they're telling me. Very good. Other thoughts? My one other thought that I had was keeping a little notebook. And it just kind of strays a little bit away from listening. But, you know, each surgeon has a little bit different technique of how they do things, or they might like a special instrument or whatever the case may be. And so all of the years that I worked in the OR, I used to keep a little notebook in my pocket with a pen. And if there was something that I wanted to remember, the next time I worked with that surgeon, I would just jot a little note in my notebook. And then the next time came around, I had, you know, something, you know, a resource to go to that would help me remember what that specific thing was, which was always effective for me. So I always give notebooks and pens to all my students when they go to clinicals. Excellent. So what does being mindful look like? Mindfulness, the book talks about mindfulness. So what does that look like to you guys? Mindfulness is being fully present in the moment. We mentioned eye contact. Sadie says not being distracted. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not
Being
letting
present. I'm sorry, Juan, go ahead.
Just not letting your thoughts wander and just focus on the present moment, on the here and the now.
Yep, for sure. It's definitely a good skill to have as surge techs as well. So the listening process, the book talks about some, gives us some helpful tips or steps, is to select and organize, to notice things and prioritize them. And prioritization is a big one in the operating room. Like the surgeon might give you 2 or 3 things that they need, or he needs, she needs, and to be able to prioritize those. Today, for example, in the lab, you know, when we finish our final count, as surge techs, we ask for our dressings, right? And so one of the questions was, well, does it matter which ones I open first? And that's a fantastic question, right? So you think about what ones your surgeons are gonna want to use first, and then you can open them in that order. And then that way your surge tech can keep the surgeon going while you're opening, you know, the nurse is opening other packages or whatever. So prioritization is a big one. And sometimes we have a nurse that can't prioritize. Either they're not familiar with the operating room setting, or maybe they're preoccupied with something. And we have to help them prioritize as well. I used to work one nurse specifically, I can remember, who was the nicest lady on the planet, but could not prioritize. She'd been a nurse forever, so you think she would have learned it. But, you know, the situation could be you're just getting started with surgery and you need like your suction and your cautery plugged in, but she's, you know, getting the water for the casting material. Like, that comes at the end. Like, can you plug in my bovie and my suction? And so with her, I would kind of have to keep her like one step ahead of her. Like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Which makes our job a little bit more complicated sometimes. Interpreting, right? And I think that's where, you know, you guys were saying about just asking questions. I think Juan was saying that, and getting clarification. And then responding, and voicing our viewpoints. That came up earlier too. You know, making sure that we let them know that we've understood, or that we get clarification or whatever, and you know, take care of whatever the surgeon's needs are, let's say. And then I thought this was interesting. Did you guys know that when you have a conversation, the next day you'll only recall 35% of it? I could swear it would be more than that. Apparently it's not. That explains some things. That's why writing things down, like I've always been the type to like jot things down so I could go back later, like the sticky note queen. And then, of course, environment and other obstacles that can impede listening is like message overload, right? When you just have too much information coming at you simultaneously, can be message overload. Also message complexity, right? If it's just like above our heads, or something of that sort, it could be difficult for us to comprehend, understand, and listen. And then those environmental distractions. Some situations that I can think of in the operating room that apply are when you're doing some sort of minimally invasive surgery, like let's say we're taking the gallbladder out with a scope. So laparoscopically, removing the gallbladder, surgeon decides that he or she's not going to be able to remove it laparoscopically, and now you have to shift to an open procedure. And that is a process, right? So the nurse is going to be opening all of these different instrument trays for you, sutures, suction tips, cauteries, whatever the case may be, so that you can do this open procedure. You're needing to count it as it comes to the field, and the surgeons are wanting to get rid of everything laparoscopic, and you know, they want the knife, they want to make an incision, they want to start right away. And so that can be a situation where there's definitely message overload, because there's a lot of things coming at you that you're needing to get and count and keep the surgeon going and get the stuff coming from the nurse, get the stuff that we're not using off the field, get the stuff that we need to use up on the field. And that can kind of be chaotic at times.
If that happens, do you have the nurse go get the stuff for you, or do you have to go get it?
Yeah, the nurse is going to get the stuff, and oftentimes we'll we always want to prepare for like those situations where laparoscopic might turn open. So we're probably going to have those supplies in the room or close by. And so then the nurse can just get those and start opening, those things for us. But then again, sometimes like that's what we do. We know ABC, what the surgeon uses, but the nurse might not. So then it's, again, keeping the surgeon going, but then communicating with the nurse to say, can you please open this first? Or can you please open this next? Or I'm going to need this right away, so that, they can keep you can keep the team going by keeping her going to get you what you need in the time that you need it. So it'll be close by. They'll open it for us. So that we can stay there and keep doing what we're doing. Yeah, good question. Other questions?
I'm kind of curious, with all this in mind, are there a lot of surgeons that do surgery with music in the background?
I think there's a fair amount. Yeah. And that was a big struggle for me. Like, I lost my hearing in my right ear in 2007. And I had like vertigo. I had this whole like issue with my ear. But when I went back to work, like I predominantly worked in like the ortho rooms where they have a tendency to like loud music, and there's drills and saws and hammers, and it was really hard to hear, like, anyways. And then being down an ear, was even worse. But there's surgeons definitely, I would say there's more that do like to listen to music than don't, but hopefully it's more in the background instead of the foreground. Yeah. And then you have some surgeons that don't want any like noise at all. Like there was a couple ophthalmologists at the surgery center, one in particular where the nurse sneezed out in the hall, and he sent the nurse out of the room to tell the nurse in the hall to be quiet. Like it was a sneeze. So there are some surgeons that like no distractions whatsoever, which he's the only one I ever knew that was like really, really weird about no noise in the room. So. Good question. So some forms of non-listening, pseudo-listening. Anybody ever do this? Pseudo-listening? You're pretending to listen? Anybody got any funny stories to tell about pseudo-listening?
I feel like people do this all the time. I mean, like, my best friend, she lives in Japan. And so we talk on the phone every day, like we'll FaceTime. And there's a lot of times where like she'll call me and I'm doing homework or something, and I just kind of have her sitting over here while I'm on my computer. And she'll be telling me all about something. And I'm just like, yeah, yep. And then she'll ask my opinion. And I'm like, wait, what did you say again? Or I'm like, oh, well, I really wasn't, and someone like her, I just admit it. And I'm like, I actually didn't listen to a single thing you said. But when it comes down to like at work, sometimes my boss will be telling me a funny story about something that had happened. I'm just like, but I'm like doing my work, not paying attention to what he's saying. And then he's like waiting for me to respond. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I got myself in a position here. Like, he thinks he's having a conversation, but I wasn't listening to anything he was saying. I was just responding with like, yeah, And so it happens all the time to me, which is bad.
My 5-year-old is starting to pick up when I'm not listening to him.
Oh.
And I feel so bad, but sometimes I'm just so busy like trying to do things and he's just talking away and he'll like, Mom, like he just knows I'm like not there. So, yeah.
Oh man, they learn that so fast.
I'm not into politics at all, but my parents are, so I'll always do that when they start going in on all the political stuff. I'm just like, yep, just smile and nod until they change the subject.
I'm the same way with my mom. Like when she gets started on politics, like I just, just like you said, hoping pretty soon, like she'll start talking about something else. But yeah, I totally understand that.
And usually I won't catch it until she's halfway into the next conversation.
Yeah, you've zoned out for too long. You're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm back now.
This isn't with me, but my sister is a very extremely talkative person. Like if the subject is herself, she can go for hours. So when she calls my mom will literally like set the phone down and you can hear her in the background just and she'll go walk around and then come back and she's just got to like every once in a while be like, oh really? Oh wow, that's crazy. Wow. And then my sister just keeps going. So yeah, that's I guess that's why I'm on the quieter side because I grew up with that.
Yeah, you didn't have a choice, right? My mom's totally a talker. And as I know, like if I call her, like it's going to be an hour and a half that I'm on the phone. And I can't find a good spot to be like, Mom, I gotta go. Like, I don't, but yeah, she'll be the same way. Or then finally, if I have the opportunity to start talking, then she starts talking to the dog. I don't know if anybody else has like ever had this but me, but then she starts talking to the dog and then I don't know, she's having a conversation with them at that point. I don't know. It's very strange.
That's exactly my mom. That's why I don't really have to pay attention when she starts talking about politics because she'll just talk to herself the whole time. And you can finally throw in something in the next conversation, then she'll take that and run with that, and I'll have to listen to her talk about whatever I was trying to talk about for the next 30 minutes.
Yeah. I try to text my mom more than the phone call, sadly. Wow, pseudo listening. Okay, so does this have a place in the OR? Pseudo listening.
It shouldn't have a place in the OR.
It shouldn't.
No.
Or sometimes, I've found that there's situations where like the surgeon and maybe there's another surgeon assisting that surgeon, or they have a PA or first assist or whatever, and they're chatting like about whatever they did last weekend or some hunting trip, who knows, and I'm just kind of filtering that out. But then you still kind of have to keep some sort of mindfulness, right, from when they switch back and they're like, could I get a sponge, or could I get a stitch, or could I get a scissor, or whatever the case may be. So maybe that has a tendency to happen with me sometimes. What about monopolizing? Oh, this is what we're kind of talking about. That's like the pseudo listener and then the monopolizer. They're like a good pair, right? So it kind of seems like some moms and sisters are monopolizers. They monopolize the conversation and focus on themselves and talking about their thoughts and stuff. And then the last one, selective listening, this really is a thing. And it's like documented in the anatomy book, okay? Selective listening, which is focusing only on particular parts of a message. Always tease my boyfriend that he has selective hearing. And then, it's really a thing. Some other forms of non-listening that the book talks about: defensive listening. So defensive listening is perceiving personal attacks. So you're kind of searching for some sort of criticism or some sort of offensiveness when really none is intended. Do you guys know anybody like this? Defensive listening?
Yeah, that's my brother.
What happens?
He's just like a negative person. So like if you're talking to him, he likes to sit there and like almost like get anything out of you to like start a fight. So he'll take any piece of the information of the conversation and start a fight with you.
Wow. That sounds stressful.
It's super stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my sister. She like for example, the other day we told her that because she has a husky and he's like shedding now. We were like, hey, do you just mind like picking up like the little clumps of hair so like the kids don't put it in the mouths? Because my sister has like a 5-month-old who's like starting to like put stuff in his mouth, and she's like, fine, I'll just never bring him over. I was like, okay, that's not what we said, but if that's what you wanted to hear, okay.
Yeah, I think surgeons can kind of be defensive listeners sometimes. And maybe it comes with just getting to know your surgeon, but it kind of goes back to the thing of how as surge techs, we work with a bunch of different surgeons that do the same specialties, right? Like orthopedic or general surgeons or whatever. And so we learn a bunch of different techniques. And when you're working with a surgeon and you identify a technique that a different surgeon uses that might help this surgeon, they can become defensive if our approach isn't like just so, as far as like sharing what that technique would be or whatever that suggestion is. And so I found that there are some instances where it seems like they're defensive listeners sometimes. Another one is ambushing, listening for the purpose of attacking, which sounds a lot like defensive listening. And then the last one is literal listening, which is listening only to the content level of meaning, like not reading in, just taking everything like word for word, right? Verbatim. Not effective forms of listening. And so some types of listening, so that was non-listening, but some types of real listening, informational listening, which is listening to gain and understand information, critical listening, which is listening to form an opinion, to take a side or to evaluate something or someone, relational listening, which is listening to support another person or to understand another person. This is where empathy and compassion come in with relational listening. And a lot of times that involves like that summarizing or paraphrasing that you guys talk about. So I hear that you're saying this. It's like, armchair therapy, right? When you're with your friend and they're having a bad day. Okay, so what I hear you saying is X, Y, Z. And then listening for pleasure can be, going to a concert or to an opera or something of that sort, symphony, and then listening to discriminate. So which one do you guys think we're going to use most as surge techs?
Informational, probably. Definitely.
Although there may be some critical listening involved. You don't want to work with Dr. So-and-so. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so for the most part, informational listening is going to be what we'll use when we're out there doing what we do. Sometimes interacting with patients that maybe relational listening might come into play if you're not in what I would refer to as a traditional role. Like traditional role being in the hospital, scrubbing cases one after one after one after one. But maybe in labor and delivery, there's more patient interaction, surge tech to patient interaction, right? Where we're working more closely with the family and you know, that sort of stuff. Questions about any of this? Types of listening? Anything jump out at you in the chapter that we didn't talk about? Okay, well, that finishes up our 2 chapters that we have to talk about today, 3 and 4. Remember, we'll talk about 5 and 6 tomorrow, which are the verbal dimensions of communication and nonverbal communication, which is one of my favorites. Nonverbal communication. Anybody like Mr. Bean? He's like my favorite nonverbal communication example. Say it cracks me up. Okay. All right. So, no other questions about that? Have an activity for us. So, if you can find a sheet of paper, just an 8 by 11 regular piece of paper, it could be notebook paper, it could be printer paper, whatever. I'll give you a couple seconds to find a piece of paper. And then, like, if it's in a notebook, like, tear it out of your notebook so it's like loose and single and free. All right. Anybody not have a piece of paper yet? Okay, I'm gonna assume everybody has one then. Okay, so we're gonna do a little like paper folding exercise. And the purpose of this is to demonstrate what can go wrong in communication. Even though everybody's going to be like hearing the same words that I'm saying, might interpret them a little bit differently. And then you can ask questions or get feedback. So that's a thing in itself. So what I'm going to ask you to do is close your eyes. No cheating now. All right, I can see all of your eyeballs. Okay.
You said that we would be able to ask questions?
You can't ask questions.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You can't ask questions. All right, everybody have their peepers closed? Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is fold your sheet of paper in half. Keep your eyes closed now. All right. Next, tear off the upper right corner. Okay, now we're going to tear off, no, now we're going to fold your paper in half again. Now tear off the lower right corner. Now fold your paper in half. Okay, now tear off the upper left corner. Okay, now fold it in half one more time. Can it even go in half one more time? Okay, now tear off the lower left corner. Okay, that concludes the eyes closed part. So you can open up your paper and let's see if we can see what your papers look like. Maybe we can compare them with each other's papers. Oh, Lauren, that looks pretty. Oh, they look a bit different. Oh, Charlotte, yours and Lauren's look a lot alike. Desiree's looks awesome. All right, some similarities, some differences. All right, thank you for playing. I appreciate you guys. So what does this tell us?
Things can be interpreted differently between each person.
Yeah, they can be interpreted differently, right? We can perceive things differently.
To ask questions, if we could, like if we don't understand something, to ask, because all of our folds were different and our tears were different sizes and stuff. So ask questions when you can.
Yes, clarification whenever you can get it. Anything else?
Having a general agreement upon what's up, what's down, what's right, what's left.
Very good. That's an excellent idea, right? Because we had no perception of what was left or right or up or down. And that makes a difference. What about the eyes closed part? Did that factor in?
Definitely made it difficult to fold it in half.
It was like with Braille, right? So that's part of how we perceive things too, right? Like if you had your eyes open, you might be able to make the tears similar sizes on each corner, or folded in half more accurately, right? Right, Charlotte saying, and then you just had to focus on the words being said, right? You couldn't see. So seeing is, part of hearing. I'm a firm believer. Yeah. Did you guys have fun? It's like origami. Okay, I have another game for us to play. Have you guys ever played 20 questions? Okay, so for those of you that haven't, 20 questions is, we're not going to worry about 20. But basically the premise is you think of something, and then everybody else can ask questions, but only yes or no ones. Only questions closed-ended, right? That just get a yes or a no. Are you guys up for it? Okay, we can probably play a few rounds. Okay, who wants to go first? Who has thought of something already in their mind and they want to go first? No one?
Talking about anything?
Yeah. I mean, but not too obscure so that, we have a shot at guessing it.
Mine was gonna be super simple, honestly.
Okay, we like simple.
Is water healthy?
Okay, wait a second. So, I think water is healthy. My answer is yes, but the game is to think of something, but don't say what it is.
Oh.
And then, everybody else is going to ask questions. You can only say yes or no to guide us to figure out what it is.
Okay, back on mute then. I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else have something?
I'll give it a go.
Okay. Thanks, Ty.
Don't thank me yet. So do I lead you off with a hint or anything, or just?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, is it a plant?
No.
Okay.
Is it living?
No.
Is it a subject?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
A subject?
Do I what?
Is it about a subject?
No.
Is it an item you'd find in your house?
Yes.
Is it food?
Do you use it every
No.
day?
Yes.
Do you
No
cook
to the
with it?
food, yes to every day.
Okay.
Is it a computer?
No.
Would you find it in your kitchen?
No.
Is it a bathroom?
Is it a bathroom?
Yeah.
It's no, not a bathroom.
Would you find it in your bathroom?
Yes.
Was it
Is
soap?
it
No to soap. I didn't hear the other one.
is it a toothbrush?
Yes, it's a toothbrush.
Oh, you have it right there. Good. Good job. You guys are sleuths. Who else wants to try?
I'll go. Oh, you go. You go.
And then Tiffany, you can go afterwards.
No.
Is it an animal?
Oh.
Wait, so am I going first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, what was the question again? I heard two different ones.
I asked if it was an animal.
Yes.
Is it your cat?
Yes.
Oh. That was good. 2 questions. That has to be a record. Okay, Tiffany,
Okay.
you got one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it living?
Yeah.
Is it a mammal?
I want to say that.
Does it live on land?
It's not a mammal. It can.
Is it amphibious?
I want to say yes. I tried to think of something different. I'm sorry. Yes, it's a reptile.
Is it a lizard?
No,
Is it a frog?
Gator.
it's not a frog. It's not a gator.
Does it have legs?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it a penguin? Wait, no, that's a mammal. My fault.
We were on the right track with, well, with the other
Is it a
one.
kangaroo? Oh wait, they don't live in water, and it's not a reptile.
Is it extinct or still living?
No, it's still, or
Is it an iguana?
no,
Is it a crocodile instead of an alligator?
no.
Is it a turtle?
Yes.
Yay!
Good job. Good job. Okay, so anybody else want to go one more round? Final round. I'll go. Okay.
Is it living?
No.
Is it edible?
Yes.
Is it like a dessert?
No.
Can you drink it?
Yes.
Is it coffee?
No.
Is it chocolate milk?
No.
Sounds
Smoothie.
so good.
Is there alcohol in it?
I wish. No.
Is it a smoothie?
Nope.
Is it water?
Nope.
Is it a protein drink?
Nope.
An ice cream shake?
No.
Red Bull.
So creative.
Is it boba?
No. That was
That's a good guess.
creative. Wow.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
Is it soda?
Nope.
An energy drink?
Yes.
Is it a Monster?
Nope.
Bit of Bang.
Nope.
A Red Bull.
Yep.
Oh, did somebody say
Those
Red
are
Bull?
things.
Yeah, I said it earlier too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, but there was like a lot of people talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear it.
No, it's okay.
But those are so creative. You guys were like guessing milkshakes and things, and I expected someone to just be like an energy drink.
We thought you were trying to stump us. So, what's the point? Is there a point? Except for Cameron's. Would you say that it took us a while to get to the answer? Took us a while, right? We had to ask quite a few questions. So if you only could ask one question, doesn't have to be yes or no, but if you could just only ask one question to get right to the heart of the matter, what would you ask?
What is the answer?
Right. What is it? Right? Which is not a yes or no question. It's an open-ended question. So direct, open-ended questions usually the best tactic instead of this, run around yes and no. And so when I was looking for an activity for us, and I found this, and it immediately made me think of, you guys are gonna think I'm crazy, but specimen handling. So as surge techs, we do handle specimens. Whatever the surgeon takes out, they're going to give to us, right? And then we have to do something with it, which is usually pass it off the field, label it, pass it off to the nurse, whatever the case may be. And there's always 3 questions that we want to ask before we pass off the specimen. Anybody have any guesses what any of those 3 might be?
I mean, what is it? Where did it come from in the body? Like if there's duplicates right or left, or
where is it going?
Yeah, is it going to be formalin or saline or?
Yeah. Yep. So you guys are absolutely right. The first question I always ask is, what is it? Right? Tell me what it is. Is it a right breast biopsy? Is it, if it's a gallbladder, I probably know that. If it's the right leg, I probably know that too. But we're always going to want to ask, what is it? And then we're going to ask, just like Christy said, and James too, like, how do you want it sent? Do you want it, and that means, do you want it sent in formalin, some sort of preservative? If there's stones like gallstones or kidney stones or something like that that we removed, we can't put them in formalin because it will dissolve them. And so the pathologist will think that it's like, a not so funny joke when they get the specimen cup and it says stones, but there's nothing in it, right? So we want to ask them how they want it sent. Sometimes they want to send it dry, right? They don't want anything on it, no preservatives, nothing in the cup with it, because the pathologist is going to do a special test on it, like a frozen section or something like that. And then the last question that we always ask is, can we pass it off? Right, so we don't want to pass off the specimen until the surgeon says that we can, right? Because there might be more tissue that they're taking. They might want to poke at it. I don't know. I worked with a surgeon that always wanted to cut the gallbladder open before you passed it off. So, the routine for him was to put the gallbladder into a kidney basin with a scissor and a forceps and kind of set it to the side, right? So after surgery, he could cut it open and look at it inside, and then, put it in a specimen cup after that. But I find a lot of times, with new with students that are new to handling specimens, they'll want to guess what the answers are to those 3 questions instead of just asking. Like, okay, do you want this sent in formalin, or do you want it sent fresh, or do you want, but then the best practice is just to ask the question and let the surgeon give you the answer instead of trying to play 50 questions and guess what the surgeon wants and how they want it. So anyways, I thought this was a good example, a fun example of, we've played this game as kids, I'm sure, and I don't know, I still play it sometimes now as an adult. But just, kind of beating around the bush is not the best form of communication, especially in what we're going to do. But all right. What else? You guys ready for your speeches?
I have a question about the threaded discussions.
Yeah.
So like it's threaded discussion number 3. So does that mean we have to use chapter 3? Like, is there a certain section that each goes with each one, or is it the whole book?
There's not a certain section. Well, these questions actually are adapted from the textbook. So if you look through the chapters of the questions at the back, you'll probably find, or at the end of the chapters, because like some of the ideas I got were from the questions at the end of the chapters, and then I just kind of adapted them to what you guys are going to be doing. But that doesn't mean that your answer has to come from a particular chapter. It will be content that we've covered or are covering, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to come from a specific chapter. Does that help?
Yes,
or does that make it worse? You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay.
We're uploading it. Are we just uploading just the PowerPoint, correct?
Just the PowerPoint, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's got to be like, I'm still figuring out PowerPoint as I go, but like on timed slides, like as a slideshow when we sent it in, or you know what I'm saying? Does that make? Or just have it to where like you can just scroll through it and look at everything.
Oh.
So like in the past when I've used it, like when you do a slideshow, it's like this slide stays on for this long and then it switches to the next or whatever.
No, I don't think you have to like worry about any of that. Like, you know, however you save it as a PowerPoint, like with, you know, for your speech, you can just upload that PowerPoint. There doesn't have to be like, you're not recording the speech on your PowerPoint. You're just showing me what your PowerPoint for your speech looks like. Does that make sense? It's not your written out speech or recorded speech or anything. That's what you'll be doing in class. So here you're just kind of building the guide for your speech, I guess. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. If you need help like uploading the PowerPoint or anything like that, you can always text me or, you know, call me or whatever. Any other questions about the speeches or anything?
This might be a silly question, but we don't have to have like a certain amount of like words on each slide, right?
Nope.
Okay. Because like I was
Not
just
silly. That's a good question.
because I feel like it's more of a speech, so we should do more talking rather than letting our listeners read what our slides say.
Yeah, and you really want to avoid like putting so many words on your slide and then just reading from your slide. You know, they should be like your little talking points or, you know, just something visual for your audience to, you know, to have as you're talking through your points.
Okay.
And, you know, for that matter, you don't have to have any words on the slide if you don't want to. If you want to have a chart or an image or, you know, something like that that you just want to speak to, you know, that's perfectly acceptable too.
I think I need to downsize my slides then. I've got, I think, too much words going on.
Sometimes I do that too, and then just because I want to get my thoughts out, and then you can always take some of that and put it down in like the notes, you know, like at the bottom of the slide, it says like notes, like I'll put more words or like talking points or kind of flesh it out. You can always type that out in the notes if that's helpful for you.
Will the entire class be able to see the notes though? Like if we're looking at the notes and we're hosting, and don't they see kind of what, I've never been a host, so I'm not sure like what we can see versus what they see.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing to do would be to just like print out your notes pages. And then when you go to present, you'll be in presenter mode. So I don't think you can see your notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Yeah, you're welcome. I think it's something to do with Zoom too, because when if I'm like doing a regular PowerPoint presentation, just like here at school or something in the classroom, there's like a presenter view where you can see your notes and then the upcoming slide. And then all that's on the projector is the slide that you want your audience to see. But I think something happens through Zoom when you share your screen. I'm not sure.
So I have a question. I know it's completely off topic, but I'm gonna put in a word. I need to know how to say it. And I don't know how, but I'm gonna put it in the chat. And if you could tell me,
Okay.
I'd be really.
We will help you. If I don't know how, I'm sure somebody here does know how. Oh, prothrombin. Prothrombin. Yeah, that's like part of the clotting cascade, right? It's like a clotting factor. Yeah. Does that help? You say it. You say it, Lorna.
Prothrombin.
That sounds beautiful.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You got it.
Do you know how to say the word for swallowing air?
For swallowing air.
Okay, I'm gonna try. I think it's aerophagia, maybe? Does that sound right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Is it like AEROPHAGIE? GIA.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing I'm scared about medical terminology is I was like going over some before the class even started, and I was like asking my mom, like, I don't even know how to pronounce half of these things and I'm supposed to know what they are. Like she works in a endoscopy surgery center, and that was the hardest word for me to pronounce for so long. And I was like, how am I supposed to know these words and know the definitions but not even know how to say them?
I know. There is totally, yeah, I totally get you. There's so many big words, but I think it helps like once you learn like the little parts, like you learn phasia and, you know, by itself, you can say phasia, you know that it means swallowing, and then you learn another little part, which is arrow, and you know that means air or whatever. So I think learning them in their parts and then sticking them together, you know, makes them not seem so intimidating. The ones for me are like microbiology, like all the bugs. Yeah, some of those can be really tricky to pronounce. But we'll get through it. We'll practice. We'll practice. Anybody else need any help with anything?
Just kind of off topic, you'd mentioned that there'll be like other papers and things that we'll be doing. Like, I think you said that anyway. I mean,
there probably will be, yeah.
What kind of classes are those going to be in? I think.
I think in A&P there's a paper. I think it's like a 2 to 3 page paper on why is it important for surge techs to know anatomy, to understand physiology, and if we don't, how could that impact patient care? I think like something like that. There's threaded discussions in every single class as we go through. There's not one class that doesn't have threaded discussions, so settle in with those. I'm trying to think if there's, that might be the only one where there's like an official paper. I've kind of gotten away. I think there were other classes where I had papers, but I've kind of gotten away from that and tried to do some other things. Like in micro, I did have a paper. Well, I guess it will kind of be a paper, but there was more like a formal paper in microbiology. And this last group, I had them choose their own microbiology experiment. And then they all did their experiments at home and then like photographed them or videoed them and reported on them and like did a lab report and put a presentation together about their experiment, which was really awesome. So you can probably expect something like that, but so at least that one paper I know of.
We're gonna have lab for A&P. Like
we will have virtual lab. Well, okay. Actually, the jury's still kind of out on that. I was contemplating putting in some lab. I think it would be more beneficial for us to have lab in microbiology because the lab that we have in micro is focused towards sterile technique. And so I think that would be more beneficial to us. But predominantly at this point, it's going to be more like virtual lab than hands-on lab.
Okay.
Once we get into the real thick of things, though, it'll be more in person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we not going back to campus for the rest of this year? Do you know?
Correct.
That's a bummer.
Yep. So I think the lab schedule I set up for you guys is for Surge Tech, SUR 100 is like the last 3 weeks. So the last 3 Mondays of the semester, I have you divided up into 3 groups. So 3 groups of 10. And so you'll spend 4 hours on campus for lab in your Surge Tech, first Surge Tech class, and then we'll ramp it up as we get into semester 2. And then we'll just keep increasing that. Hopefully, I did hear that the campus is like transitioning into the next phase where now we can make lab mandatory, whereas before we could not. That if, students did not feel comfortable coming to campus for lab, then that was, there was no consequences associated with that besides you were missing lab time. But now we're able to require lab hours. So things are moving in the right direction. So just, slowly but surely, things are opening up and, we're one step at a time getting back to something that will be a new normal, closer to the old normal, hopefully.
I have a question regarding the speech.
Yeah.
The rubric doesn't say anything about how many references we're supposed to have unless I missed it. Is there a minimum amount of references you'd like us to have?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Just as far as reputable references, like that, they don't all have to be like scholarly articles or anything like that, do they? I mean, what are the guidelines for that as far as references?
I would avoid Wikipedia.
Yeah, I figured that.
Avoid that one. I would say scholarly articles are good. They don't all have to be scholarly articles. I mean, you know, reputable websites like government websites, you know, BLS, the, you know, the WHO, CDC, those kinds of things, perhaps WebMD, like those more popular ones. I would say to stay away from blogs because they really don't have a lot. They're just somebody like writing their opinion. So I would say stay away from that. But even if you find like YouTube videos that you think have like helpful, supportive content, I think that can be okay. Yeah, but blogs and Wikipedia, those are two that I would definitely stray away from. If you find a resource that doesn't have a date that it was written, it doesn't have an author, then I would probably, you know, stay away from those as well, unless it's some sort of, you know, data website or something like that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure.
One more thing. I have a few pictures that are my personal pictures. How do I reference those?
Good question. I know I haven't ever referenced personal photos before, but I've referenced like personal communication, which might be similar, where you just put like, and it doesn't go like personal communications don't go like on the reference page. So my suggestion would be, I think for personal communication, it's like first name, last name of the person, and then like the date.
Okay.
You know, so you might want to check the Owl Purdue website to see if they have anything about personal photos, but I would be fine with something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
What about like stock photos on PowerPoint and backgrounds that are like part of PowerPoint? You know what I mean? No? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you have to do anything with those. You should be good. Or like if you found a template or something, I think that, you know, that'd be fine. Anything else? Okay. I saw that most of you were able to do your flip grids. Was trying to do some grading this morning, so I'm working through the threaded discussions. Hopefully I can finish those up tomorrow morning for you. I don't like to have things sitting in the grade book, and I like you to get as much feedback as you can. So I'll work on that from my end. And that's all I have for today as far as class, but would like to talk to you about the Blackboard activity. And actually, it might be easiest for me to just pull it up in the Blackboard, and I can show you that really quickly. And then let me just navigate to the correct course, and I'll share my screen with you. And then I'll let you loose to work on that. Okay, I think I found it. Let me share my screen with you. All right, so this is in Blackboard on day 3. So if you just click on the folder, day 3, and then this is our Blackboard activity. So check out the video that I posted here. This is an interview between Bill Gates and Ellen. And the whole premise is like, you know, if you want to, if we want to get better at communicating, then, you know, we should watch those that are doing a good job of it, right? So this is about a 6 or 7 minute video, I think, of this interview between the two of them. And then here's some questions for you to address. So the first one is, how does the interviewer phrase questions? Are they closed, biased, unbiased? What does their body language look like? Does the interviewer paraphrase? Do they talk a lot? Do they talk minimally? So on and so forth, yada, yada. You can read through them. And then the last one is, of course, always bringing it back to us. How can you apply what you've learned to our role in the operating room as CSTs? So watch the video, answer the questions. Microsoft Word doc would be great. Please don't type it into the comments area because I can't really give feedback very well for you. I can give more substantive feedback if you submit it as a document. I can put comments and those kinds of things for you. Okay, questions about that? Pretty straightforward.
I have just a quick question.
Yep.
So when you say how does the interviewer phrase the question, what do you mean by that exactly?
So I think kind of similar to what we were talking about when we played our game with like the yes no questions, like open-ended, closed-ended. Okay. Is she like getting clarification? Is she like those kinds of things? That's what I think of when I think about how are they phrasing questions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions about this? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.